Namaskar and welcome back to Media Scan for that weekend dose of headlines, controversies and perspectives. A political storm in the Congress, a sword hanging over a sitting chief minister in Jharkhand and raids to unearth spoils of corruption. This week was a lot of legwork for reporters and a whole lot of analyzing for the debaters. We also have a special panel to discuss with us the various aspects of the all-out war on corruption. But first up, what made news? The exodus continues. One more stalwart has quit the Congress party, blaming the Gandhis squarely for the rot in the party. Former Chief Minister, many times Central Minister, and one of the senior-most leaders, Ghulam Nabi Azad, resigned from the Congress, citing the dominance of sycophants and darbaris on the decision-making process. In his letter addressed to Sonia Gandhi, he made a no-holds-barred attack on Rahul Gandhi for his alleged immaturity and promotion of sycophants. He also termed the proposed election of the president as nothing but a farce. Even as the Aam Aadmi Party tried to deflect blame to the centre, senior BJP leaders, including Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Thakur, has said that Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal was the kingpin of the liquor scam being probed by the CBI. AAP leaders claim that their MLAs were being lured by the BJP with huge sums of money but did not furnish any evidence of the same. Delhi Deputy CM Manish Sisodia is one of the top accused in the scam along with some senior bureaucrats. Punjab Police, particularly the Firozpur SSP, failed in their discharge of duties, resulting in the massive security breach during the Prime Minister's visit to the area in January earlier this year. The SSP had ample time to sanitize the route and make adequate arrangements. This is the crux of the findings of a special committee appointed by the Supreme Court to probe that incident. Union Minister Anurag Thakur alleged this was a conspiracy from the top Congress leadership. He demanded who leaked the alternate route of the Prime Minister to the protesters and who was the SSP speaking to on the phone repeatedly. The reported partial treatment of the Hyderabad police and administration came for a lot of flack this week across media platforms. Hyderabad police rearrested T. Raja Singh, an MLA, on preventive detention despite his bail from court. But the same police let off dozens of protesters shouting hate slogans and threatening beheading. The media questioned this move of the police, reportedly due to political pressure of the AIMIM. Raja Singh has been suspended by BJP for his objectionable comments made earlier. Multiple CBI raids in Patna, Gurugram and other locations brought renewed focus on the land for jobs scam related to the Railways Ministry during the tenure of Lalu Prasad. The CBI claimed it recovered nearly 200 sale deeds from the premises of Sunil Singh, Bhola Yadav and other RJD functionaries. Bihar Deputy CM Tejasvi Yadav alleged that the raids were meant to scare the Mahagathbandhan. Meanwhile, Nitish Kumar won the trust vote in the assembly after forming his new alliance with the RJD. Even before he had taken oath as Prime Minister of the country, Narendra Modi had declared emphatically, "Na khaunga, na khane dunga." Since then, it has been a relentless war on corruption. More recently, on Independence Day, he reiterated that those who had looted the country will be made to pay. Friends, from weeding out middlemen, ensuring transparency by making banking reach to the optimum through the JAM network, by linking Aadhaar, by ensuring that all social welfare benefits reach the last man standing directly in their bank accounts, by ensuring mechanisms like the GEM portal, auctioning in the case of resources, and finally, giving a free hand to the investigating agencies to pursue cases of corruption, no matter how powerful is or was the person. These entire 8 years have been, as I said, a relentless war against corruption, and efforts are being strengthened every day to ensure transparency and complete weeding out of middlemen on the one hand, and serious legal and related action on cases of corruption that had come to light in the past and are coming to light even now. To discuss this very important but sensitive issue, I have two very interesting guests with me this evening, and very interestingly, both the guests will be joining me on Media Scan for the first time, so a warm welcome to all of them. I have here with me Ramakant Gaur, well-known lawyer, expert on financial crimes and related cases. You have been reading him in newspapers and on various television channels. Welcome to Media Scan, Mr. Ramakant Gaur.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for having me. This is really a very interesting topic where I would like to contribute something for your viewers.
Wonderful. Also here with me, a senior journalist on financial issues, economic subjects, political economy, etc. You have been listening to him on Doordarshan on various occasions. I have here with me Anil Padmanabhan. Welcome to Media Scan, sir. I hope your presence on the show will make it so much more beneficial for our viewers.
Thank you, Smita.
And sir, my first question also comes to you. As I was just mentioning, sir, there has been a spate of efforts, relentless efforts through these years, first to ensure that banking reaches the last man or woman in the queue, and then reaching government benefits to them in their bank accounts, linking various documents with Aadhaar so that there is no hanky-panky in dealing with schemes, and on the other hand, the action on corruption. But before I come to the action part, how would you, in your assessment, sir, view the efforts in making and ensuring mechanisms for a foolproof, transparent system, mainly issues which should have been put in place long ago and have been overdue, but are finally being put into place?
Thank you, Smita. See, Smita, the very simple way to understand what has happened in the last decade, actually, more than just the last 8 years, is that India has enabled identity under Aadhaar and then weaponized it. First, enabling the identity is a very big thing because most people in this country struggled to establish the identity. Even people like us were struggling to, we had to get our papers attested by a gazetted officer, etc., before we submitted for a KYC or a passport or whatever you name it. But the launch of Aadhaar solved for that identity problem. Now, the weaponization part has come, particularly in the example you cited, the mobile also took off at that point, and then the bank account. So you linked your identity to your empowerment in terms of getting a bank account. Think of these stats. In 2010, 43 crore people didn't have a bank account. In 2022, 43 crore people have a bank account. And in my view, almost 90% of them are because you weaponized identity. So you solved for eKYC. A large chunk of these may be zero balance accounts, but the point is that these 43 crore people have a bank account which they never had, which means financial inclusion has happened. Alongside financial inclusion, they are also now part of the system where they were outside. So this economic GPS that the government created by linking your Aadhaar, your Jan Dhan bank account and your mobile is what enabled the direct benefit transfer, which has taken off in a big way. COVID-19 accelerated that push. So if you think back 2 years ago when COVID struck, the government of India had to transfer money, cash to 200 million people to mitigate them from the fallout of COVID. So how could we have done it without, when social distancing was in place?
Absolutely.
That's exactly when DBT came into play, and 200 million people got transfers instantly into their accounts. And even today, PM Kisan, any of these big schemes, all happen through DBT. So that is the power of enabling and monetizing identity.
Sir, if I may just intervene for a second here on this economic inclusion, as you just mentioned, no doubt it has empowered those who needed to be empowered for last many decades. But you know, I'm not going to flag all the issues raised by the naysayers, but certainly there was a reluctance more so among the educated people about this linking of Aadhaar, etc. Now that the consequences are showing, the results are there for everyone, would you say it's time to stop raising these doubts about linking of bank accounts with various documents and facilities, since it has so helped to empower the poorer and the neglected sections, sir?
Smita, see, it's not a very simple binary. The arguments, whether motivated or not, were legitimate arguments because they were arguing on the compromise of privacy. Because there's a lot of our data now, not just in the hands of the government, but in the hands of a lot of intermediaries. So it can be misused. So the biggest threat to the world is climate change right now, and second is cyber security. So if you do not ensure privacy, do not guarantee it, there is a risk. But yes, it may have been motivated and etc. But the point is that yes, proof of concept, like you said, has been shown. More importantly, the whole business of direct benefit transfer has cut out the middleman. So,
exactly.
So you know, the savings to the exchequer as of March 21 was something like 2.28 lakh crore, which is 2.28 trillion. If you remember, the first COVID-19 fiscal stimulus that came, which was almost entirely reserved for the bottom of the pyramid, was 1.76 lakh crore. So you funded the first COVID stimulus package through the savings that you generated through direct benefit transfer. So when the PM mentioned at Red Fort, he was basically linking the opportunity cost, the opportunity lost that a beneficiary suffered, and he even cited this number. So
yes, and in fact, sir, if I may add, I mean, every penny that is saved from corruption, from middlemen, etc., is a penny which goes back to the people of the country. But allow me to bring in our other guest as well and have his perspective from a legal standpoint, if I may. Mr. Ramakant Gaur, if you are able to hear me, sir, my first question to you is, we keep hearing from various people, more so from experts like you, that this war on corruption is not complete till we wage this war against money laundering, because the proceeds of crime or the wealth generated from corruption has to, to be caught and given back to the nation, if I may say so. How important is this in your view, sir?
See, corruption has two facets. One is money, another is power or influence. So to wield the power in the political parlance or in the bureaucratic parlance, or to get favors, people involve into corruption in their individual capacities or in corporate capacities. So individual corruption, we see it on every day. A cop stops your vehicle, take money, allow you to go. Some of the cops are involved into this kind of corrupt practices. On road, this affects the individuals. And Honorable Prime Minister, when he declared, and in fact he conceded, and he had the audacity to say, yes, there is corruption, and still, though we are taking action, but corruption is there. So that's an honest admission, and I really acknowledge and appreciate that. Another corruption, the part of the corruption is corporate corruption. People have had thousands of shell companies. They were rotating their money through these shell companies, and they were involved into layering of the proceeds of crime. So any money which is arisen from the commission of crime is proceeds of crime, and this proceeds of crime was being put into layers of various shell companies so that it appears to be legitimate. So one law was not sufficient, and therefore various laws have taken radical changes in last 1 decade. If you look at the history of Prevention of Money Laundering Act, it was evolved in 1998.
Yes.
Took the shape of Act in 2002, yet it was implemented in the year 2005. But from 2005 to 2011, there were not, we did not see major number of cases in this Act. But after 2011, in 2013, certain changes were brought in. Act was made stringent, and from 2013 to 2015, 19, and 21, there are major changes.
If I may intervene, Mr. Gaur, if I may intervene for a second here. Sir, on these stringent provisions that were brought in the amendment to the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, we know that the Supreme Court came with a view very recently, few weeks ago, but now there is also indication of a rethink in their own order, if we may follow the news report.
We are not
Yesterday
going to
only
a 3-judges bench took a different view.
So I would not like to preempt an apex court order or viewpoint at this stage, but however, sir, what would you expect to see in terms of provisions in the PMLA to make this fight stronger, at least from what it is now, if not more?
See, the review petition was admitted only on limited counts. It's not that that every provision of whatever was stated by Justice Kanvilkar bench would be looked into. First thing which Justice Ramana led bench observed, that if we give investigator so much of power, so much of discretion, that it would take possession of the attached property much before the completion of trial, meaning thereby before it is confiscated by virtue of a judicial order, then such handing over power to the executive would not do any good to the society. Okay, so that power has to be exercised in a limited manner,
yes, please
and
make
that
your
has
point,
to be within the legal framework. This was one. And other aspects which is being castigated by various people and organization and judicial activists, even ex-judges of Supreme Court, that you have taken the sweep of Article 21, which says bail is a rule and jail is exception. That's something which is not palatable, because constitutional right has to be held supreme.
Yes, but the counter argument to that, Mr. Gaur, the counter argument that I have gathered from experts like you is that, these financial crimes particularly are of such a nature that if the message goes out, then the people are able to flee, or at least, stash their proceeds of crime even before a further investigation happens. But we'll wait for the apex court view on that.
I would quickly comment on this.
Yes, please make your point.
See, that is the very issue which needs to be looked into. If you are exercising your discretion to arrest, then please do that, but do that judicially.
Right.
You are actually arresting somebody for an offense to the tune of 5 crores, and you are actually not touching somebody who is accused of 500 crores.
Right. Point taken.
So that's something which needs to be looked into by judicial power.
Fine. On that point, sir, I shall like to bring in Mr. Anil Padmanabhan as well, mostly because, my next question flows from what you have just stated. Mr. Padmanabhan, on this, action on corruption cases and scams, particularly when the question comes to politician, it becomes headlines. The reality is there is action on all fronts, but it's the political leaders, the party leaders who tend to become, come into the headlines more than others. My question here is, sir, some of them are older cases, some are very recent ones perhaps. The one common argument I heard on media platforms across this week, and I must raise it on Media Scan therefore, is opposition leaders, they allege, and their supporters allege that while there is a lot of action seen when it comes to political leaders connected with opposition-led parties, the same zeal is not visible among the agencies when it comes to the ruling party or its allies and friends. Now that argument has been, that allegation has been put forth repeatedly. The investigating agencies are sticking to their argument that we are pursuing the cases in the case of the investigations, and whoever is culpable or guilty or suspected will come under investigation. How do you see this whole debate, sir, in terms of war on corruption?
Okay, Smita, just before I answer your question, I just want to add to what Mr. Gaur said so
Yes,
that your viewers have a perspective on this PMLA Act. It's not just fallen out of the skies. This has actually got bipartisan consensus built into it. It was initiated by the NDA under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and it was passed by the Manmohan Singh regime, who led the UPA, which is the Congress regime. And secondly, this is connected to the UN-sponsored institution called the Financial Action Task Force. So they set out global laws to fight terrorism. So if you recall 9/11, 26/11, these are all undertaken, funded through shady means. And which is why the FATF was designed to get countries to align their domestic laws to global laws so that terrorists cannot use routes to fund. If you recall, Pakistan is on the grey list because they are fallen foul of these.
Yes.
So India, all these changes that people are talking about are actually changes not initiated. The intent is not because the government of India decides to become tough on it. It's rather that they are changing these laws frequently in India to keep them aligned with global laws. And that's, global laws are changing frequently because the terrorists are very smart, very deft. They are changing their game often. So you need to keep, the law has to play catch up. So just to share the perspective, I want to come back to your question.
Yes, sir.
It is a very simple he said, she said. Okay. So yes, it is. If you look at, I haven't seen the empirical numbers because see, everybody speaks in very rhetorical terms. So you're right. The big headlines are about opposition politicians coming under the scanner. But the issue is that this is a regime which is pretty young. So a lot of these crimes are pretty historical in nature. And and please remember that many of them have been challenged in courts at various levels. So it is only now that the court has cleared the decks for prosecution. I'm not naming several of these senior politicians. So which is the circumstance in which it has happened now? It is sheer coincidence. It may be intent. I don't know. I don't know to speak for the government or to think if some motivation is happening. But like I said, it's a he said, she said. So you follow the facts, and if the facts do, and end of the day, the judiciary is there. So if the government is indeed misusing, like Mr. Gaur pointed out, there were certain aspects of the PMLA ruling which came just few weeks back, which the Supreme Court itself believes there is a need for correction or nuancing, which is fine. They leave it to the judiciary. I don't think we should start thinking for the judiciary. Leave it to them, right or wrong. I mean, right, presumably, they will rule on it. So
fine. Point taken, sir. But very quickly, before I come to Mr. Gaur for another issue, on this, as you said, at the end of the day, the courts are there. So if anybody feels investigation or action is not justified, they will always be brought into the court of law. The agency is not going to decide things. However, this he said, she said debate or rhetoric that goes on, do you think somewhere it deflects attention of the people from the larger question, that is to ensure better transparency and weed out corruption from the society, sir?
Smita, that is politics. So you can't prevent anybody from exploiting it for or against. But I would just say that leave it to the people of this country. Like I said, judiciary will take care of whether you're violating the law or not. The people of this country will take care of whether you're violating their privacy, their rights. So when they vote you in or vote you out. And the larger interpretation I would take away from this entire conversation is the rule of law. India, for the most of its 7 decades or 75 years of independence, has been ruled by exception. So I know somebody, I can break the rules. Like Mr. Gaur said, he talked of bribing, but you can, instead of a bribe, I can make a call and I can get out of it. That is exceptions based. Whereas we follow rules based, then the rule is the same for Mr. Gaur and me. So if we both violate the traffic law, if the camera catches us, let's take the camera as a rule of law, then it's going to be fair to both of us. If he violated and I violated, both are going to get impounded. I violated, he didn't. I get caught, he won't get caught. That's the rule of law.
Sir. Understood.
I think this country is now
please allow me
to get used to the concept of rule of law.
So please allow me to stop you here because I am almost running out of time. And I want to come back to Mr. Gaur on another very important issue. Very quickly, Mr. Gaur, if I may ask you. Sir, you explained to us, and Mr. Padmanabhan was very articulate in telling how India's commitment in this war against corruption is also linked with, the sensitivity in the global platforms, because as the crooks, if I may say, they become updated, we also have to fashion our laws accordingly. But even if the best laws are in place, sir, we do agree that somebody who has done injustice to the society by stealing the money of the taxpayer, by robbing the nation's exchequer, if the cases against, even if the investigation is very well done, if cases continue forever, there is no verdict, there is no final decision on the cases, this pendency itself is a sort of injustice on the people of the country. You being a lawyer who have been pursuing cases of financial crime very diligently, sir, how much is pendency of cases a factor in creating disappointment or not able to do what our laws seek to do?
See, this is the most unfortunate part of a person's, judicial rights. A person faces inaction on the part of investigating agencies. Like we got an order 3 days back only, where Enforcement Directorate did not file the complaint for 5 years. They opted to low-lie. On the other hand, there are people like Hassan Ali Khan. This is something which was a most glaring case at one point of time. This case was registered in year 2007. Enforcement Directorate filed the complaint in 2011. Till this date, charges are not framed.
A little quickly,
After
Mr. Gaur.
16 years,
I have very little time.
After 16 years, a person is not being prosecuted. The charges are not framed. So justice is actually quite elusive for a person like him. He is on he's in very critical situation. So his rights vis-a-vis rights of the investigating agencies are both equally hampered. So if these are the cases, and we see if we could not take this trial to the culmination, which all trials are being culminated, we can actually understand. Because if the allegation, it was a case where the allegations were that he stashed around $8 billion in Swiss
So
bank.
are you saying, sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I really have no time left on the show, but just to wind up, are you saying that to solve this problem of pendency, it is the agencies and of course the judiciary who have to both sort of work in tandem to see that cases reach their logical conclusion?
Very true, because unless and until investigating agency diligently work and put the witnesses on the floor so that the real work in the courtroom can take place, That's something which is required on the part of investigating agencies.
Fine.
As far as the courts are concerned, they are flooded with the work. At the same time, infrastructure is less, but they should have the willingness to conclude the trials.
Right. Point taken, sir.
From trial court to
I
Supreme
guess
Court, pendency is growing.
This question of pendency is a much larger problem actually, and we need to go into a completely another dedicated debate to see what mechanisms and infrastructure update is required to reduce the pendency. But on that point, gentlemen, I am sorry, I have completely run out of time on the show. Thank you very much for putting things so clearly for the benefit of our viewers. Mr. Anil Padmanabhan, you joined us for the first time this evening, but you have been very eloquent on this complex but important subject. Thank you, Mr. Padmanabhan, for coming on the show. And Mr. Ramakant Gaur, thank you for finding the time in your busy schedule to explain those legal complexities to us. We shall come back to you on more related issues. Thank you again. Viewers, from this short but very interesting conversation, a couple of things become very clear. Number one, it is important not only to investigate cases of corruption, but to bring them to their logical conclusion in the courts if we really have to ensure justice in every case. At the same time, viewers, it is important to cover that last mile in order to weed out corruption from the society, particularly the role of middlemen and other people who steal the hard-earned money of the citizens. On that point, it's a wrap-up on Media Scan for this evening. But do keep watching DD India as we continue to scan the media for you. Namaskar.